Welcome to Legal Lines. This program is being brought to you by the York County Bar Foundation. My name is Barbara Sardella, and I'm the guest host of this program. We have two guests today, both of the judicial candidates for the vacant position on the York County Court of Common Pleas. Judge Michael Flannelly, who was appointed in July 2012 by Governor Corbett to take the seat of the late Judge Chuck Patterson until the upcoming judicial election, and the Honorable Todd Platts, former state lawmaker and former United States Congressman, who served 3 terms in the United States House of Representatives. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome.
And thank you very much for participating in our program.
Great to be with you, Barb.
Before we begin our discussion, I would like to remind our viewers that the primary election day is Tuesday, May 21st, and both candidates have cross-filed to run in both the Democratic and the Republican primaries, as they are permitted to do under Pennsylvania law. And before I begin asking questions, each candidate will be given a chance to make a brief opening remark. And by the toss of a coin prior to the show, Mike will begin his opening first.
Okay. Just as a matter of introduction, I graduated from Wake Forest School of Law back in 1982. I clerked for a judge for a year, and then went into private practice. The first 10 years or so, I was with a larger firm. My concentration was in civil litigation at that point. After 10 years, I went into private practice on my own. And during that time, I continued my emphasis on courtroom work, but also a more generalized practice, including wills and estates and those types of things. About 8 years ago, I was asked to interview for the York County solicitor job, and interviewed and got the job. And during that time, I did that for about 7 years. I represented the county commissioners and all the various needs of county government. So I would represent them on contract issues, employment issues, and litigation issues. And that gave me a wide exposure to county government. I represented the nursing home, Parks Department, District Attorney's Office, the Sheriff's Office, and the prison, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, after you mentioned earlier the tragic death of Judge Patterson, President Judge Stephen Linebaugh put my name forward, and eventually I received the nomination, and I've been on the bench since July of 2012. Since that time, I've presided over a wide variety of matters. My primary responsibility is juvenile delinquency work. I also preside over juvenile drug court, but I do matters such as civil motions, divorce, custody, support contempts, protection from abuse, basically a wide range of matters.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Todd?
Well, Barbara, thanks for hosting us. Great to join you and Mike here this evening. And I know that Mike and I both wish we weren't here because Judge Patterson would still be on the bench, and his tragic death created this opening.
Yes.
But I am honored to be a candidate. Growing up here in York County, York Suburban High School graduate, Shippensburg University for my undergrad, and then Pepperdine University School of Law. Came back to York with the law firm of Barley, Snyder, Seneff & Cohen originally, and then went into the State House for 8 years, and then the last 12 years as United States Congressman. And I gotta say, it's been an amazing privilege to represent my home community in elected office. It's something that I knew I wanted to do from a young age. My mom and dad gave me the example of community service, about giving back, and really it was an 8th grade social studies teacher by the name of Earl Lucius, who said, Todd, you may want to look at that community service as a career in the sense of public service. And I've known ever since then that I wanted to serve in a position where I could make a difference in my community. My 12 years in Congress was a remarkable privilege and experience, and when I left it, I didn't do so excitedly, because I loved what I did. I was passionate, but I've always believed in term limits. And my mom and dad taught 5 of us kids that you have to keep your word. And so at the end of 12 years, I voluntarily left Congress and stepped out of office, but my interest in serving didn't end. And therefore, I want to give back in a different way, and am now a candidate for judge. One of the things I would emphasize, Mike and I have different backgrounds, and I think that's a good thing, that one, the voters have a choice between candidates, as well as a possibility of diversity on the bench between our backgrounds being somewhat different. While I have been an active licensed attorney for more than 18 years here in Pennsylvania, my primary focus has been on the legislative side and helping to make law. And what I like to bring to the bench is, one, that insight as a lawmaker to the laws that are then applied in the court, but also as a decision maker. The role of a judge is to be a neutral party, hearing all the facts from both sides and then applying those facts to the law. That's what I've done as a congressman, is to hear the facts on very complex issues, make an honest, impartial decision about the merits of those facts, and then go forward and cast a vote on behalf of the people of this district. So again, honored to be a candidate, and thank you for this opportunity to join you and Mike in the program.
Thanks very much. Okay, we'll start our questions, and I'll start first with Mike. What are the most important factors a voter should consider when deciding which judicial candidate to vote for? And how does your background and experience relate to those important factors?
Well, and this is a subject upon which Todd and I have a profound difference. I believe that a judge needs to have a substantial amount of experience in the courtroom. And that's for a very simple reason. While a judge does make decisions based upon fact and law, a judge also has to make rulings. And I'll give you an example. A few weeks ago, I had a rape case. Before I got to the ultimate decision about whether the juvenile was guilty or innocent, I had to make a number of rulings in the case on procedural and evidentiary matters. Those rulings had to be made from the bench, no time to look the law up. The only way I was able to make those rulings quickly and accurately is by having the experience of making those same objections myself in the courtroom, or responding to those objections when they're made by opposing counsel. When I do that, and then I can have a chance to watch the judge and how the judge rules on those objections. And if you do that over the years, and in this case, basically about 30 years, you develop that intuitive feel for how that works. There's no way I could have done that without my background in the courtroom. So, that is a critical factor. As far as my other experiences, I think working as county solicitor made me familiar with all the various departments that made up county government. So when I was assigned support contempts, I had already represented the domestic relations office and was familiar with how their office worked and familiar with the people that ran the office. When I was assigned juvenile delinquency cases, I had already represented the juvenile probation department. And as a result, I was able to step right in and get to work. I had the distinction, I suppose, when you serve midterm, is that you don't get to go to baby judge school, is that what they call it. Mm-hmm. I was put on the bench right away and got to work.
Thank you very much. Todd?
Well, I think with any public office, and especially service on the bench, the number one qualification is integrity. As we saw, unfortunately, in Northeast Pennsylvania, where we had two judges with great experience, yes, but did not have integrity and were being horrific in their treatment of children for the ability to line their own pockets. So integrity to me is number one, and I'm glad to be judged on my record of integrity throughout a 20-year public service career, and my approach of always putting people first in whatever my job is. Along with that certainly is your intelligence, your knowledge of the law, your work ethic, your temperament. All those factors go into. A few years ago, Judge Euler and the late Judge Casamatis were on this program and talking about what makes a good judge. And they talked about competence and understanding the precedential authority and statutory authority. In other words, not making just feel-good decisions, but you got to follow precedent, follow the law. Impartiality, fairness. They never once said you have to be a litigator. In fact, the late Judge Casamatis said, look for candidates who have these type of qualities of courteousness, of how they handle people, and that have the qualities of a good servant, because a judge is really made on the bench. And Judge Euler went on to say that even in his 15th year, he was still working at being a good judge, even 15 years into it. So I think it's a collection of qualities, but I would start again with integrity. And my approach, again, my record is a very public record because of my public service, my work ethic, and I'm glad to be judged on that record.
Thank you. My next question, again, Mike, you'll go first.
If you want to alternate, just usually for fairness, we'll go back and forth.
Sure.
So
That works for me.
Yeah.
All right.
Want to be above board here.
I was going to have you go first in the second half, but that's fine.
I got you.
Judges for state courts must run for election. You've had to make political and community connections. As a judge, you will continue to have connections and relationships within the community. Under what circumstances would you envision it could be necessary to recuse yourself from deciding a case?
Well, I think it's a very important question because it goes to the impartiality of the bench and of any single judge. There's no way that you're going to have the entire bench be 100% impartial, meaning we all live here in the community, and you're going to have relationships, whether it be friendships or past relationships in your professional duties. But bottom line is you have to make sure that there's never even the appearance of impartiality. A good example of the way I approach that, and it relates to the campaign actually, and it may sound strange, but it's avoiding even the impression of being beholden to anybody. In my 20 years of service in the State House, Congress, and now again as a candidate for judge, I don't take special interest money. All of my funds come from individual citizens. And the reason I do that, no one's ever going to buy my vote or buy my actions on their behalf. But even the appearance of being beholden to somebody erodes the trust of the people, and especially if it's dealing with the courts. So if it's going to be somebody comes before you that you have obviously a close family relationship, that's going to have to be set aside. You're going to have to recuse yourself. If it's somebody you had business dealings with, if it was a large contributor, you're going to have to step aside. And there's no exact, formula. More so, I think, is as I look at it, you're handling that case undercut the trust that the public needs to have in the judicial system. And if it does, it's better to err on the side of recusal than to create even the perception of not being impartial on the bench.
Thank you. Mike?
Well, this very subject has come up in my time on the bench several times, and the problem, what it runs into is I'll get handed complex summary judgment motions in cases involving doctors. And through church and family connections, I've become familiar with a number of doctors. And the key thing is not to recuse yourself from every case just because you know somebody. Mm-hmm. So the practice I have is, as soon as I know one of the physicians, I get all the attorneys on the phone. I explain my situation. I know this doctor through my son, or I know this doctor through church. I explain it as fully and as completely as I can, and I give them time to think that over. And I give them my law clerk's phone number, and I say, think it over for 48 hours. And if any of you have any problem whatsoever, you let me know, and I'll recuse myself from the case. I think it's important not to recuse yourself from every case just because you have that opportunity. There's only a limited number of judges, and it's important that you just not slough off every case that comes in front of you. But I think if you're clear about what your relationships are with the attorneys, and you let them and their clients make that decision, I think that that's the best way to handle those types of issues.
Thank you very much. Well, we now have to take a short break. Legal Lines will be returning in 2 minutes with our special guests, the two candidates for judge on the Court of Common Pleas of York County, Todd Platts and Michael Flannelly. Welcome back to Legal Lines. Today we are interviewing both candidates for the position of judge on the Court of Common Pleas of York County, Todd Platts and Michael Flannelly. Since Mike answered first in the first half, we'll start with Todd this time. First question: why do you wish to be a common pleas court judge?
Well, it really goes back to my whole interest and commitment to service to your fellow citizens. As I shared in the first half, I've known really since age 14 that public service is what I want to do, and I've always believed it's a high calling. I've always said I've never had an interest in being a politician, but I've always had an interest in being a public servant, and I distinguish them two pretty significantly. as a public servant, it's about making a difference. And I've had the chance to do that on the legislative side, and that's given me great insight as a maker of the law. And I'm excited about the chance to do that now on the judicial side, a different branch of government. And I think my background really gives me a unique perspective, not a totally unique. We currently have two judges who came out of the legislature. Judge Bortner was a state house member before being a state senator, and now has been on the bench for about 10 years and done a great job. Same with Judge Greg Snyder, who came out of the state house in Harrisburg and then went on the bench and has been on the bench, I think, for almost 20 years and has done a great job as well. But coming out of the legislative branch, it gives you a great insight to how laws are made and the intent behind the legislation and the applying of those laws. But it really, the thing I would emphasize here, when I made my decision to leave Congress after 12 years and keep my word on term limits, the expectation was I was going to maybe run for Senate or governor or something statewide, and that moving up. To me, it's not about advancing through the ranks. It's about serving and giving back. And the opportunity to make a difference in my home community in a very important way, helping to decide judicial cases, to be that hardworking, impartial, dedicated judge, to make a difference for my fellow citizens, something I'm honored to be a candidate for and certainly would be honored to do if given the chance to serve.
Thank you. Mike?
Well, becoming a judge has been a passion of mine for quite some time. It started in the courtroom, having the chance and opportunity to practice in front of judges like Judge Casamatis and Judge Miller, who are probably the two judges that I hold up as being the finest judges I've ever practiced in front of. And I always am mindful of the example they've set. The courtroom is something that I've always just been interested in, the process, the rules, the technical matters that come up. The good thing is that when I put on the robe and took on that job, I found that my passion for the job was well-founded. It is a thrill and an honor every day to put on the robe and walk into that courtroom. What I find is that the case that's in front of me may not be the most important case that I've ever had, but I know that at the person in front of me, it's probably the most important case that they've ever had. So I treat every case that way. When they look at me, they're looking up at me because with a little bit of terror, perhaps, because they may lose their freedom. They may lose custody of their child. They may lose significant financial resources. So I treat everybody with respect and with dignity. The late Judge Patterson, who I had a hearing with on the day of his death, treated everybody that way, and certainly, he's another one of my role models with regard to that area. The thing that I like about it best, particularly in dealing with juveniles, is that this is the one area of the law where you can have a tremendous impact on a young person's life. And I've been involved with youth sports and youth group leader at church and Sunday school teacher, but here it's one-on-one. And it's an opportunity to make an impact. The probation officers will tell me afterwards, maybe a week later, that what I said to a kid about getting his work done or doing this or doing that has an impact. And that's something that certainly keeps me going every day.
Thank you very much. We'll have you go first again here. Second question. What reforms are needed in our judicial system, if you think any are needed?
Well, no system is perfect,
right.
And certainly the judicial system is not perfect. Probably the area that I can speak to that's closest to my heart deals with the area of placement of juveniles. As Mr. Platts mentioned earlier, there was a great deal of controversy about that in Pennsylvania, particularly in Luzerne County. What we're finding in Pennsylvania is that kids need to be placed less often. And when I say placed, put in residential placement facilities. They need to be placed less often, and they need to be in more community-based supervision. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The main reason is that it's ultimately more effective. So I preside over juvenile drug court, which takes kids who have drug and criminal involvement, Normally, these kids in the past would have been placed in facilities all around Pennsylvania, been cut off from their contact with their family. And while they might have received treatment, there's also impacts with regard to that. They become, as Bev McArith, our Department of Public Welfare noted, they become institutionalized, and they're not ready to hit the streets prepared when they turn 18 or 21, whenever they're released. We take kids, we supervise them intensely. They get random curfew checks, they get regular drug tests, they get counseling and treatment, and we have found that that is a tremendous way to go. Pennsylvania, of the 10 states that have most kids in placement, Pennsylvania is the only one that increased over their 10-year period of time. Texas reduced their placement days by 37%. It's expensive, it's ineffective, and it's something that we need to change. And certainly, I'm glad that currently I'm part of the change in Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Todd?
Barbara, I referenced two areas, and maybe not so much reform, but strengthening or further improving, and it's really good work by our York County Court today. One is our treatment courts. I serve on the York County Treatment Court Advisory Board, and had the chance to see firsthand what a difference these treatment courts are making, whether it's a drug treatment court, the DUI treatment court, or now the Veterans Treatment Court with Judge Rebilcock. And it's really thinking out of the box. Instead of just having a DUI violator come before you for the second, third, fourth, fifth time and looking at how to penalize them, is how do we stop them from being a repeat offender? And looking at the underlying cause, drug, in this case, alcohol addiction perhaps, or if it's a drug addict, a repeat offender. The treatment courts really are about saving tax dollars, getting true results, so we reduce recidivism rates tremendously, and getting people really reformed and back on the street as contributing members of society. As well as these courts are working, there are waiting lists. I know with the DUI, I think more than a third of the criminal cases in York County relate to DUI offenses or DUI-related offenses. But there's a waiting list to get in the DUI. And again, Judge Kennedy's had tremendous success with those who are in that program. So that would be the one area. Second would be dealing with dependency court. In my time in the legislature, I spent a lot of time on children's issues. And probably one of the greatest responsibilities of the judicial system is protecting children from abuse and neglect. And when a child is abused or neglected, they end up in the dependency court. And while the judges, law enforcement, the child welfare professionals play a huge role in protecting that child, an area that Judge Casamatis, the late Judge Casamatis, focused on was court-appointed special advocates, where we have volunteers that are trained and then appointed by the judge to be that child's advocate within the dependency court proceedings, and to really be the person focused on the best interests of the child. Great program. It's well established, but there's a tremendous waiting list. So we have children who are abused or neglected going through the process that don't have that advocate assigned to them. I would want to take the example of Judge Casamatis, and I know current Judge Maria Musty-Cook has done, to be out there in the community helping to raise awareness of, one, the crisis we have with child abuse in this community, far too high and unacceptable. Every case is one too many, but also the importance of people stepping up from all different backgrounds to volunteer, to be CASAs, to be those volunteers, to look out for the children that come through the court system.
Thank you. One more question here, I think.
Okay.
You want to go first on this one?
Sure.
What court assignments do you feel would most suit your abilities and your preferences?
Well, I've been very fortunate in this regard because the assignment I received was the same assignment that Judge Patterson had, which is juvenile delinquency and juvenile drug court as being the main emphasis. As I said, I've worked many years with kids in a variety of settings, both in scouts, church, and youth sports. My wife is an elementary counselor. My son is in education as well. So our family's always been passionate about youth, and so this working with juvenile delinquents and working with juvenile drug court has been terrific and very rewarding. So I'm happy to be there, and hopefully I get to stay there. With regard to my other assignments, I'm glad to be working on, I get assigned civil pretrial motions, summary judgment motions, and preliminary objections. I've been doing that work for 30 years, both as private practice and as county solicitor, so I'm very comfortable handling those, and I enjoy looking at the computer, getting on Westlaw, and working away on those. So, that I'm perfectly happy where I am. Obviously, our assignments are up to the president judge ultimately, but it looks like that's the slot I'll be in.
Thank you.
Area where Mike and I agree in the importance of juvenile delinquency, juvenile dependency cases, and where I would also be excited about serving. And it relates to, again, my legislative work, both at the state level and in Washington. Spent a fair amount of time working on the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. That relates to how we deal with juveniles in the court systems. And it's not just the juvenile comes before the court, but how the system as a whole is treating that juvenile. And one of the areas that we focused on at the legislative side that I think judges can play a greater role in is ensuring that we're not turning a criminal, a juvenile delinquent, into a victim by how we place them, and meaning in adult settings where they go from being the one being punished to the one being victimized by adults in those settings. But those two areas, juvenile delinquency, juvenile dependency, but bottom line is having an efficient court is what I think is going to be most important. And so wherever the president judge believes there's the greatest need, that's where I would be excited to serve. Ideally, it would be in the juvenile area, but if not, it's going to be whatever the court needs, and I would be excited about doing. The other thing I'd mention is just an area of agreement that Mike and I have on this is this campaign, sometimes campaigns can get heated. Unfortunately, that's more common in political campaigns. But it doesn't have to be that way. And the way I approach it in running here with Mike is to run for the privilege of serving. So I don't see Mike and I as opponents or as enemies. We both have the same desire to serve in the same position. And we have an obligation, especially as candidates for judge, to do so in an honorable way and run positive campaigns. And it's certainly something I've sought to do always in the past and again this time. But I'm glad to be on the stage with Mike and share that interest and commitment to giving back.
Thank you. Well, we just have a few moments left to wrap up. Todd, would you like to start with just a general closing remark?
Well, one, thank you again for hosting us and
welcome.
for the Bar Foundation putting on Legal Lines. It's great to be part of this program. I'm honored to be a candidate for judge. It's a great nation in which we live, that a kid from a middle-class family growing up here in York County is allowed to put my name forward for public office, and to have served in the past and to be a candidate again and perhaps serve in the future in public office. It's not the norm the world over, and especially to be a candidate for the judicial system, because our judicial system is, second to none anywhere in the world. And again, honored to be here.
Just in closing, it has been an honor and privilege to serve the people of York County as judge. Every day I put on that robe, I feel that responsibility. I take it seriously. And whether I serve beyond December 31st or not, it's been an honor and privilege to serve, and I just wanted the people of York County to know that.
Thank you, Mike. I see that we are now out of time. Before I conclude, I would like to thank both of our guests for participating in the program, brought to you by the York County Bar Foundation. Please remember that the primary is on Tuesday, May 21st, and both candidates have cross-filed for the primary election, meaning they're both running on the Democratic and the Republican primaries. Please plan to vote on Election Day, and thank you for watching Legal Lines.